Hello Buzzers, John here. In this week's video, I wanted to explore a technique and a particular tool within Photoshop that you can use to create really cool retro effects. Now what we have here is a fairly modern looking portrait, but it's quite possible to kind of age it and give it that retro treatment by adding some light leaks to it. So we've got a bit of cross-processing going on and some colourful light leaks. And if you're not familiar with light leaks, that's what used to happen if you opened the back of the camera too early with a film camera, or even worse, you didn't have a light-tight chamber to keep the film in the first place. But light leaks are basically edge fogging on the film. It's where the light actually leaks in, touches the edges of the film, washes out the contrast, sometimes affects the colours as well, hence the slightly cross-processed look. But it gives you quite an attractive retro look to your images that can work really well, particularly on portraits or anything that's quite nostalgic. Anything that you want to dress up with a kind of a 1970s look. So I'll show you the before and after. There it is before, quite contrasty, nicely lit, and there it is afterwards with our light leaks top and bottom and a little wash of cross-processing on the colours. So let's find out how we do it. We're going to build it from scratch. You can actually make light leak templates, but we're going to build this one from the word go so you can see what goes on in Photoshop. So what I'm going to need is my layers panel up on screen because all of this can be done within layers. So if your layers palette isn't on screen, just go to window and choose layers from the long list and you'll get your layers palette up on screen. You can see there we've just got one layer, our standard image, and we're going to build on top of this to create our light leak effect. Now to make the light leaks, the best way, I think, is to use the gradient tool. But instead of using the gradient tool in Photoshop in the normal way from the toolbox, instead you're going to use a gradient fill layer. Now to do this, we create an adjustment layer. So we click on the adjustment layer icon in the layers panel, and you can see there, gradient, right up near the top. So click on gradient, and what you get is a gradient fill dialog box and a new adjustment layer called gradient fill 1. Now this is the device we're going to use to build our light leaks, but we need to have the right colors in place. If we go over to the gradient fill dialog box here, you can see there we've got the gradient, we've got the style of gradient, which is linear. That could also be radial or all sorts of other things, but we want linear gradient. We've got an angle of 90 degrees. We can actually change that. If you want to change it, you can have the gradient coming in from one side, or of course the other side, or the top or the bottom. You can kind of do what you want, but we're going to leave it there set to the bottom at 90 degrees. I'll just key that in. There we go. But we do need to change the color. At the moment, we've got black to clear. So black at the bottom running through to clear at the top. And we need to change that. And to change it, there's no real way of knowing this, but you just have to click in this box here. Click right in the gradient box and you bring up the gradient editor. So it's sort of a hidden command really, but that brings our gradient editor up on screen. And you can see here we've got all kinds of different options for choosing preset gradients, none of which I'm going to use because we're going to build one from scratch. So I'm going to start with a black to white gradient, this one here over on the left. I'll just start with that preset, but then I'm going to change all the values so you can actually start with any preset you like, but start with something that's simple. Now what we need first of all is a white strip at the bottom of our light leak. So to get a white strip, we're going to start over on the left-hand side. This is the base of the gradient. This is where it starts from, and we're going to click on that color stop here. You can see there it's got the color set as black. So we're going to change that to white. So we just click on the color box, drag up to the top left corner to give us white, and then click OK. That's now set white as that color. At the other end, we want black. So we're going to introduce this stop here. We're going to click on that, and we're going to make that color black. So we drag it down, click OK. So now we've got white to black. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Okay, we need to introduce some other colors in between because light leaks have a particular color. They go from a sort of a fiery orangey color, yellowy orange, through to a fiery red. And then we want it to go to black afterwards. So to introduce other color stops into the gradient, we're just going to click on just underneath the line, click there, and you introduce another stop. Now we want this one to be a bright yellow. So the color there, we just click on the color box and we're going to set, using the color picker, we'll find a yellow, something like that should do. So a nice bright yellow, we'll click on that and then click OK. So now you can see we've got white to yellow to black. White here, strip of white, strip of yellow, strip of black. So we're building up our gradient as we go. Now we need one more color, and that's that fiery red I talked about. So let's click another stop, just click in the gap under the gradient here, click on that, and now we want to change the color of this one to red. So we go for a nice bold red, just slide up the color picker. That will do us nicely, really fiery red. Click OK, and now we've got sort of a German flag almost. We've gone from white to yellow to red to black. And you can see there's the white, there's the yellow, there's the red, there's the black. And you can change the gradations and the spaces between these colors by simply moving the stops around. So if we want a very thin strip of white, we need to move the yellow quite close to it, and that does that. If you want a thin strip of yellow, you move the red quite close to the yellow, and if you want the thin strip of red, you can move the black up closer to the red. So you can see by manipulating these sliders, these color stops here, we change the shape of the gradient. Now at the moment it's hard to imagine it as a light leak because we can't see the image. So I'm just going to click OK for the time being. So I'll click OK to the gradient editor, then click OK to the gradient fill, and that gets us back to our layers panel. And what we now need to do is change the blend mode, the layer blend mode on this adjustment layer. So to do that, we make sure it's active. We know it is. Then we click where it says normal and we choose screen from the list. When you choose screen, you see the gradient coming through the picture. Now we can see what we're doing. We can go back to our gradient editor, and to do that is nice and easy. Just double click on this box here. That will load up your gradient fill box. Then you click on the gradient to load the gradient editor. So now we can move our color stops around to get the kind of look we're after. So we want a very thin strip of white, then we need our yellow, quite a thin strip of yellow to give us that fiery edge, and then we want to go to black. Maybe we'll make the black a bit more gradual. You see, as we move the black stop along, we get more of that red band because we're making the red bigger. We're allowing it more room within the gradient editor. So I think something like that looks okay. That gives me a reasonable result. We maybe let's just split those up a little bit. We'll get a bit more of that yellow coming through. Just give that more of an edge. That's the kind of thing. Okay, so that's our light leak built. Maybe our white's a bit too big. Let me just move that back a touch. Just playing with the stops. That's good. That looks pretty good there. Okay, we'll accept that gradient. So we'll click OK to it. And we now have a custom gradient that looks like a light leak. And in the gradient fill dialog box, as we saw, we can change the angle if we want to. If you want to move it around, just move this box and you can have it running in from the side, for example. That looks pretty cool. Or you can have it running in from the other side. Or you can have it running in from the top. You just change the angle to put it wherever you like to get that nice light leak effect. I'm going to run this from the bottom though on this one, so let's just go back. I'll run it at 90 degrees. I'll have a slight angle. I quite like that little bit of angle on it. That's good there. It gives a slightly more organic feel than that very straight line gradient we had before. Now, at the moment, you're probably thinking, this is too loud, it's too bold, it's too aggressive. So we'll click OK, so it's set. And then to make it a bit more subtle, all you've got to do is use the opacity slider in the layers palette. So just click on the opacity slider and you can move it down, make it more subtle, take it out completely, bring it in subtly, and just get that subtle sort of sheen of a light leak coming through instead of that rather full-on effect. But I'll leave it full on for now because that's what we want to see what we're doing in this example. And that gives us that nice washed out look. Now, of course, you can introduce another light leak at the top of the frame if you want to as well. If we wanted to do that quickly, all we do is copy this gradient fill adjustment layer and then we can edit it separately. So to copy it, just make sure it's active and hit Control or Command and J on the keyboard. That gives us another one straight over the top. So let's double click on that now because that can help us to edit it. And if we want to change the angle, we can just put it up the top of the frame. So we can run it up there, something like that. And then of course, it's in kind of the right sort of place now, but we want to edit it to make it look a bit better. So we simply click on the gradient fill here, click on that, and that gives us our gradient. And we can then sort of adjust it and edit it as we see fit. You can, of course, change the colors as well if you want to. Just click on the right stop and then change it. So if we wanted a more orangey color instead of the red color and this one, we could do that. And that works perfectly well. So you can see there's loads of flexibility that's on offer here by using this gradient editor tool. It seems quite complicated because it's multi-layered, but you can get some great results going simply by setting up your gradient, set up a rough and ready gradient, then you can edit it to get the right kind of shape and get the right kind of look that you're after. Let's just change the angle of that a bit more. I quite like the effect, but let's just square that up a touch. Let's go across. That's the sort of thing there. Yep. And there we go. That's got a nice light leaky retro look to it. But the colors aren't quite right yet on the portrait. We need to kind of cross-process these to give that kind of aged look to the shot. So to do that, we need to be on the portrait itself, the portrait layer. So we'll click on that bottom layer in the stack because this is the one we're going to adjust. And to adjust it, we're going to use curves. So we click on the adjustment layer icon and we pick curves from the list. And that brings up our curves palette. And this is where we're going to make our color manipulation to the portrait image. So to do that, we're first of all going to wash out the contrast a bit. If you've let light onto your film, it's going to wash out the contrast. So this is really quick and easy. Just drag that bottom corner there, the bottom left corner, drag the line up a little bit. The more you go, the more you'll wash out contrast. So it's simply on that vertical axis, just take a bit of contrast out, and that worked. I think that's about right there. That's good. Now you've done that, we can apply the cross-processing. But we don't want to use the RGB curve to do cross-processing. That's not going to do anything. Instead, we're going to use the colors. So if we click where it says RGB and choose red, we're then going to make an S-curve from the red channel. So we drag down a little bit there, and we push up a little bit there. That gives us an S-curve on the red channel. We're then going to do the opposite on the blue channel. So we click where it says red, we choose blue from the list, and we're going to push up a little bit at the bottom, and we're going to pull down a little bit at the top. And that gives us a nice kind of cross-processed look. You could also incorporate the green channel. So if we go for green, we can either push it up to get more green in, which gives us a very retro look, or we could pull it down to make it more magenta, which looks equally retro. But I think we're just going to give it a little bit of green there, just a subtle tweak of green, and maybe pull it down a bit there to get some magenta. That looks pretty good. So that's got a nice cross-processed result. And if you want to work on your cross-processing look without having all your light leaks visible, it's really easy. Just switch them off. Click on those two eye icons alongside your light leaks, and you can get your cross-process look independently. So your view of what you're doing isn't kind of colored or masked by the gradients you've got creating the light leaks. So we can see there, that's before, and that's with our cross-processing effect. And I think that's okay. Maybe we'll just have a little tweak of the blue channel. I'll just get a little bit more in there just to get a slightly more aged look to the photo. Okay, so once you've done all that, you can switch your light leaks back on. And then, of course, you can just fade them down to get them looking as you want. So to do that, we simply click on the appropriate gradient. At the moment, I've got the one at the bottom. There it is. We can switch it on and off. And we'll simply dull that down a bit using the opacity slider. Then we'll do the top one as well, and we'll just dull that down a little bit as well. And there we go. So we can switch all those off now. There's our before, a very modern, very contrasty, nice looking shot. And then by adding that little bit of processing, we can get light leaks and a cross-process look to age the print and give it that kind of warm 70s feel. All right, we'll give that a go. It's great fun to do and also gives you a good chance to experiment with the gradient controls in Photoshop because there's all kinds of stuff you can do with that control to add extra color sheens to your pictures. All right, hope that was useful. Have a play with that and add some light leaks to your pictures to give them that true nostalgic look. All right, thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.